You're listening to the Inflamed and Exhausted Podcast, the show for women who are tired of being tired. I'm Lieah Torbert, CEO and co-founder of Wellness by Davlie, and I've been where you are, burned out, foggy, and wondering why my body couldn't just bounce back like it used to. On this podcast, we'll uncover the real reasons behind your fatigue, inflammation, and hormonal shifts, and I'll give you practical tools and guidance to support your body, restore your energy, and take back your health, one small step at a time. Let's get to it. Welcome to the very first episode of the Inflamed and Exhausted Podcast. First off, I just want to thank you so much for showing up for episode 1 and trying us out. I know there are a lot of podcasts out there, so the fact that you're here listening and learning about my story and what inflammation could possibly be doing in your life as well means a lot to me. So my name is Lieah. I am the creator of the show, but also the CEO and founder of Wellness by Davlie. At Davlie, I help women who are experiencing exhaustion and brain fog in their lives dial into what's causing those symptoms and help them reduce the inflammation and other stresses in their lives so that they can feel healthier and stronger. But I haven't always done this. So I actually have a 20 plus year background in accounting, which may seem a little weird now that I am running a wellness brand, but I wanted to share my story with you today so that you can understand I'm not just someone who has, gone to school and done some studying and decided this was where I was going to be. I have really struggled on this path to figuring out what was wrong with me, what was causing all these issues in my life, and am finally on my way to recovery and healing. This story, if I go way, way back, obviously, I could find all kinds of things in my younger days, but where I really feel like the pivot in my life happened for me was during the pandemic. At the beginning of 2020, we all know what was going on, and I was working for a oil and gas company at the time. We manufactured chemicals. And so when everything shut down, we were really nervous. We were like, well, no one's buying oil-filled chemicals right now. The world just shut down. And then the FDA made some changes to the rules and regulations around who could make sanitizer because the world needed so much sanitizer. And we were lucky enough to be able to refit our operations very quickly and transition to help provide sanitizer across the world. It was a very stressful experience. It was a very interesting experience. We learned a ton of things along the way. But one of the things that kind of fell to the wayside in all of that, despite the fact that we were doing this to provide sanitizer to help keep people safe and to increase their health, we weren't actually taking care of ourselves very well because we were so engrossed in the business and doing all the things we needed to do to just survive and then keep the business going through that time, that a lot of us, were very stressed out. We weren't eating right. We weren't sleeping right. We weren't going to the gym. Obviously, there was no gym to go to, and a lot of us didn't have setups at home. So there was a lot of transition through that led to some bad habits as we started coming out of the lockdowns, as we started coming out of isolation and then trying to go back to our old lives where we had incorporated these new habits into our life where we just worked all the time and we weren't really thinking about all of the other things that were going on. And over that period of time from early 2020 going through to the end of 2021, I was starting to feel myself slip. I was not doing well at all. I was extremely stressed out. I was irritable and cranky all the time. I didn't sleep well. I was barely eating. The only exercise I got during that time was maybe a random walk here or there around the neighborhood when I felt like I needed to get up and move. I just wasn't focused on that in my life because the pressures at work demanded so much of me that I really felt myself slipping. And some things happened earlier in 2021 that made me start to think that maybe I wasn't on the right path, not just with that company, but with my career in general. And as those things developed and as I continued to feel myself slipping away, towards the end of 2021, I made the decision that I was going to leave that job. I felt a lot of conflict about that. I really enjoyed the people that I worked with. I had an amazing team. We were really poised to take the company to the next level. And so I was really conflicted about it because I felt like I had finally reached the pinnacle of everything I wanted to achieve, but only at work. The rest of my life was falling apart. I was so sick. I felt like I was on the verge of a mental breakdown, and I had to sit and think and just have really deep conversations with myself about where I wanted my life to go and what I wanted that to look like. And at the end of the day, I realized that all the things that I had sacrificed to reach that point in my career, those were so much more important than having the title or the position or the experience that I had gained through working with this company. And so I made the decision to leave. At that time, I was still thinking I was going to stay in the accounting space. And so I opened up my own consulting company. I did some outsourced CFO work for some small businesses here in the Houston area. I also picked up some bookkeeping clients. So I stayed with the same type of work, but I changed the focus so that I could build my schedule a little more flexibly for me, so that I would be able to go for walks in the morning, make my lunch, take a break during the day, try to reduce the stressors in my life. But as that started to build all on its own, I realized that the stresses of owning your own company are a completely new type of stress that I hadn't really anticipated. And so I was still stressed out. I went very quickly back to my old habits. And, it was business as usual, working all day, not eating right, not exercising, sleeping like crap. And other than the lack of people around me and working with my dogs every day instead of being at the office, things really didn't change that much. And it took me a little while to figure that out. I had my head down. I was working. I'm building this business. Everything's going great, right? At least in my mind. And then I started to realize that I was repeating some of the same habits over and over again. And I'm sure you've experienced this when you try to do something new in your life, where maybe you're going to exercise 3 times a week, or you're just going to try to walk more, or maybe you're going to try this new diet, right? When you first start it, you're very committed to it. You're doing all the things that you need to do. You're super focused and you're feeling great. You're feeling like you're making momentum. And then there's one little road bump, and then there's another bump, and then there's another bump. And over a period of time, you just slowly find yourself falling back into those old habits. And that's what happened with me. And so I find myself at the end of 2022. I've had my head down all year. I'm working hard. And I finally, for the first time since the pandemic started, catch COVID. And I had a pretty bad case of it. David and I were down for about 2 weeks. We watched a lot of Lord of the Rings and got caught up on some of our TV shows that we hadn't been watching, which I guess is the positive way to look at what happened. But I thought, okay, well, this is a really bad flu. Everybody I know has had it. We finally caught it. It's not going to be a big deal. And David started to get better and I didn't. I kept going back to the doctor. I couldn't breathe. I felt like there was this huge pressure on my chest. I'd never had any kind of asthma problems before in my life. My sister suffers from that, but I had been fortunate enough, other than to have, the regular hay fever and things like that. Everything was fine, but then I just couldn't get better. I had no energy. It took everything that I could do just to get out of bed every day for months and months. And the business that I had worked so hard to start to build to support my life almost went under because I could barely work. I couldn't market. I couldn't talk to people. I didn't have the energy to really do anything. So I'm just trying to take care of the few clients that I had and figuring out, how am I going to get past this? And 6 months went by and I still wasn't really getting a whole lot better. And the doctors, they had nothing for me, right? Like no one really knew anything about long COVID. And to be honest, we're even today in June 2025, there's still still doing research trying to figure some of these things out. They've made some progress, but we don't really have an answer yet from a medical professional perspective on what to do to solve these issues. But back in 2023, there was nothing. The doctors had no protocols. They had nothing they could do. They're like, well, we can put you on another round of steroids, or we could try this, but nothing worked. And I was getting really frustrated because I'm like, I'm supposed to go to my doctor. My doctor's supposed to help me, and my doctors couldn't help me. And over a period of time, they just kind of shrugged at me like, there's nothing we can do. We don't know, right? So hopefully someday you'll just feel better. And it kind of reminded me of another thing that happened to me back in 2014, where I was experiencing some other issues completely unrelated to inflammation or anything. And the doctors still couldn't help me. And so it was resonating, that old feeling of there's something missing here. The doctors can't help. Something is obviously going on. This is not in my head. I'm not making this up. I'm not just laying on the couch and I can't move because I'm lazy. I've never been that kind of person. And so I decided that I was going to go learn about nutrition, because that's just how my brain works. I'll go get a certification. I'll go get the foundational knowledge, and I'm going to figure this out. And I went and got a certification. It took me a little while because I'm not feeling good, struggling with exhaustion every day. So trying to learn all these things on top of all the things I already couldn't manage, slowed me down quite a bit. But over a period of time, I managed to get that certification done. And during that time, I'm also listening to audiobooks and podcasts and doing my own research, trying to figure all these things out, going down the rabbit hole. And I finally get to the point where I'm starting to feel a little better. I've made some adjustments in my life. Things are getting good compared to where they used to be anyway. And I had this personal revelation where it's like, there's so many other people that I know who are going through the same thing. And I see all these stories online on social media all the time of people that are suffering, people who cannot figure all this stuff out. And then add on that to the fact that I actually just turned 45 yesterday as I'm recording this episode. And I'm getting to that age as a woman, where perimenopause is a thing. And so now there's all these other hormonal changes on top of everything else that's going on, which makes things very complicated. So for you ladies that are out there listening to this, if you're in your mid 40s and you're going through this chaos too, it could be perimenopause, it could be inflammation, it could be both. So that's kind of part of what I've been trying to figure out in my journey. And so all these different things are going on, and I'm seeing all of this out here on social media. People are suffering, people are reaching out, they're trying to figure out what's going on. And I realized that I could help. And it was a really scary thing for me because I've always done accounting work. Accounting work is easy. You just sit in the background and you're crunching numbers all day and you're going through paperwork, and it's not a big deal, right? You're just making sure all your debits and credits match. And I mean, there's some more to it, but at the end of the day, you're not talking about people's health and impacting their lives from that perspective. And so this idea that I would start this wellness company was really scary, that I would make such a huge change, that I would leave everything that I had worked towards for the 20 plus last years and just say, I'm going to switch gears completely. This isn't about my education and my health anymore, but I'm going to go help people who are going through similar things that I'm going through because I can. And I'm very, very fortunate that David supports me in that, and that he has supported our family to where I can take this journey and build this company and be able to do this podcast and work with women who need support in their lives to get help, because not everyone has the time or the determinedness, if you want to use that word, to go out and do all of this research yourself. And so working with someone who has taken the time and who is better suited to the research side, which can be really boring for some people, but I love it, to be able to go out and just say, hey, like I've already gone down this path. I've looked at all these things. This is what I've found. Let's work together and let me help you. And once I was able to kind of get over that fear of, oh, wow, I'm really going to jump off this cliff here, like this is happening, Wellness by Davlie was born. And so that was in August of 2024. A ton of stuff has happened since then, but as I've gone through and I've listened to the stories that I'm hearing, and I've dived even deeper into the research, and I'm looking at all of these things, I was trying to find my voice, because there's so many things that we could talk about on a podcast that I could share in videos or social media posts or any of those things, or build my business around. But as I'm diving deeper and deeper, I realize that inflammation is the key. Inflammation connects all of our major diseases: heart disease, diabetes, cancer, Alzheimer's, our autoimmune diseases. When you dig down deep enough and you ask all the questions, what it boils down to is our body is inflamed. And my next question is, okay, well, why? How did it get there, right? And so that leads into diet and exercise and toxins in our environment and other lifestyle choices that we make about the stressors in our lives and how our bodies work, and genetics and a ton of other things. And so that again, like, it feels a little overwhelming, right? Like, how are you going to frame that conversation? How are you going to share all those things? And I decided to kind of boil it down in this podcast. We're inflamed and we're exhausted. The inflammation is causing all of these things in our life, and we're tired, and we don't necessarily know who to turn to help us. We're seeing a lot more people out in the health and wellness space who are stepping up and talking about these things. And so it's very, very exciting time to be able to step up and say, I'm going to be a voice in this. I'm going to share what I've learned. I'm going to help people. And I'm going to put this podcast out here and just see what happens. I want to be able to share the information. And I know people really love consuming content through the podcast. So that's why this podcast was born. And that's why on this podcast moving forward, what you're going to hear from me is evidence-based discussions on inflammation topics. What does it do in our body? How does it get there? What can we do to change it? Looking at different aspects of our life. This isn't just about diet. I mean, diet is huge, don't get me wrong, but there are other things that we can do that might be a little less stressful to our everyday, that can make improvements while we're working on the diet. And the other things that I'm going to talk about, I'm going to continue to share my journey, although in much shorter. I won't be dialoguing like I am today, sharing my entire life with you. But I think that sharing my journey is really important. And I think that you understanding and you hearing that even someone like me who has spent all this time and has invested so much of my life into getting better, I still have bad days. So I don't want you to think because you are listening to one of my episodes or you're hearing something else out of my content, oh, everything's perfect and I just have to be perfect and then my life will be like that. Perfection is not the goal here. That's something you're going to hear from me a lot. The goal is to make small, manageable changes in your life. Don't overhaul everything in your diet on day one. Don't throw everything out in your kitchen. You don't need to work out 7 days a week and meditate for 2 hours and all these things, right? Like, it's small, incremental changes. And I don't want you to compare yourself to me. I don't want you to compare yourself to someone else that might come on the podcast that's sharing their story or something else that they've learned, or compare yourself to your next door neighbor or your sister or whomever. It's your journey. It's your personal choices. What works for me or your neighbor or your sister might not work for you. You may have something going on in your life where you're just not able to cook every meal every day, and that's fine. This is a no judgment zone. Take what you can do, implement what you can do, and then see how you feel. And as you get better, as you learn to reorganize your life a little bit and make some of these changes, maybe you can do more. Maybe you feel well enough that you don't have to. Everybody's journey is different. And so that's going to be a big thing that you hear from me on these episodes as well, is it's your choices, your life, your experience, your journey. I'm just here to share what I've learned and go into what I've experienced as I've tried these different things, and then have guests on the show from time to time who are sharing their story or maybe something that they have learned as well, so that you can listen to that information and decide what's going to work for you in that moment and maybe someday down the line. And I mentioned this before, but I just want to remind everybody, like, I am not a medical doctor. I have a certification in nutrition, and I am pursuing other certifications to expand my knowledge base. But anything that you hear on the podcast, please make sure that you talk to your doctor. You may have medication issues. There could be some other health concerns that you need to make sure that nothing's going to be conflicting before you make major changes in your life. So schedule an appointment with your doctor, talk through what you want to do, and just get some feedback from them first to make sure that there's nothing going on that might conflict with the things that you're hearing on the podcast today. So this is going to be the end of the podcast for today. I really appreciate your time in learning my story and what this podcast is about and what we're going to be doing in the future. So please subscribe to the podcast now. That way you don't miss new episodes. We'll be dropping new episodes on Monday every week. And you can also follow me out on social media. All of my links are in the show notes. So we'll talk later. Have a great day. Thanks so much for joining me today on the Inflamed and Exhausted Podcast. If this episode helped you connect the dots or gave you a new perspective, I'd love it if you'd follow the show and leave a quick review. It helps more women find this message. If you're ready to take the next step, head on over to wellnessbydavlie.com, where you'll find free tools, anti-inflammatory teas, and information on our brand new anti-inflammatory Power Reset membership. Remember, healing isn't about being perfect. It's about staying curious, staying kind to yourself, and taking the next best step. I'll see you next time.